Hare Krishna. So today we will start chapter 3 from Srila Prabhupada Leela Amrit volume 1. A very nice saintly person. There has not been, there will not be such benefactors of the highest merit as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees have been. The offer of other benefits is only a deception. It is rather a great harm, whereas the benefit done by him and his followers is the truest and greatest eternal benefit. This benefit is not for one particular country causing mischief to another, but it benefits the whole universe. Srila Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati. Abhay's friend, Narendra Nath Malik, was insistent. He wanted Abhay to see a sadhu from Mayapur. Naren and some of his friends had already met the sadhu at his nearby ashram on Ultdanga Junction Road, and now they wanted Abhay's opinion. Everyone within their circle of friends considered Abhay the leader, so if Naren could tell the others that Abhay also had a high regard for the sadhu, then that would confirm their own estimations. Abhay was reluctant to go, but Naren pressed him. They stood talking amidst the passerby on the crowded early evening street as the traffic of horse-drawn hackneys, ox carts, and occasional auto taxis and motor buses moved noisily on the road. Naren put his hand firmly around his friend's arm, trying to drag him forward, while Abhay smiled but stubbornly pulled the other way. Naren argued that since they were only a few blocks away, they should at least pay a short visit. Abhay laughed and asked to be excused. People could see that the two young men were friends, but it was a curious sight. The handsome young man dressed in white khadi kurta and dhoti being pulled along by his friend. Naren explained that the sadhu, Srila Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati, was a Vaishnav and a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. One of his disciples, a sannyasi, had visited the Malik house and had invited them to meet Srila Bhakti Siddhant. A few of the Maliks had gone to see him and had been very much impressed, but Abhay remained skeptical. Oh no, I know all these sadhus, he said. I am not going. Abhay had seen many sadhus in his childhood. Every day his father had entertained at least three or four in his home. Some of them were no more than beggars, and some even smoked ganja. Gaur Mohan had been very liberal in allowing anyone who wore the saffron robes of a sannyasi to come. But did it mean that though a man was no more than a beggar, or ganja smoker, he had to be considered saintly just because he dressed as a sannyasi or was collecting funds in the name of building a monastery or could influence people with his speech? No, by and large, they were disappointing lot. Abhay had even seen a man in his neighborhood who was a beggar by occupation. In the morning, when others dressed in their work clothes and went to their jobs, this man would put on saffron clothes and go out to beg in this way earn his livelihood. But was it fitting that such a so-called sadhu be paid a respectful visit, as if he were a guru? Naren argued that he felt that this particular sadhu was a very learned scholar and that Abhay should at least meet him and judge for himself. Abhay wished that Naren would not behave this way. But finally, he could no longer refuse his friend. Together they walked past the Parshnath Jain temple to one Ultdanga with its sign Bhakti Vinod Asan, announcing it to be the quarters of the Gaudiya Math. When they inquired at the door, a young man recognized Mr. Malik Naren had previously given a donation and immediately escorted them up to the roof of the second floor and into the presence of Srila Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati, who was sitting and enjoying the early evening atmosphere with a few disciples and guests. Sitting with his back very straight, Srila Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati appeared tall. He was slender, his arms were long, and his complexion was fair and golden. He wore round bifocals with simple frames. His nose was sharp, his forehead broad, and his expression was very scholarly, yet not at all timid. The vertical markings of Vaishnav Tilak on his forehead were familiar to Abhay, as were the simple sannyas robes that draped over his right shoulder, leaving the other shoulder and half his chest bare. He wore tulsi neck beads, and the clay Vaishnav markings of tilak were visible at his throat, shoulder, and upper arms. A clean white Brahminical thread was looped around his neck and draped across his chest. Abhay and Naren, having both been raised in Vaishnav families, immediately offered prostrated obeisances at the sight of the revered sannyasi. While the two young men were still rising and preparing to sit, before any preliminary formalities of conversation had begun, Srila Bhakti Siddhant immediately said to them, "You are educated young men. Why don't you preach Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message throughout the whole world?" Abhay could hardly believe that what he had just heard. They had not even exchanged views, yet this sadhu was telling them what they should do. Sitting face to face with Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, Abhay was gathering his wits and trying to gain a comprehensible impression. But this person had already told them to become preachers and go all over the world. Abhay was immediately impressed, but he wasn't going to drop his intelligent skepticism. After all, there were assumptions in what the sadhu had said. Abhay had already announced himself by his dress to be a follower of Gandhi, and he felt the impulse to raise an argument. Yet, as he continued to listen to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta speak, he also began to feel won over by the sadhu's strength of conviction. He could sense that Srila Bhakti Siddhant didn't care for anything but Lord Chaitanya, and that this was what made him great. This was why followers had gathered around him, and why Abhay himself felt drawn, inspired, and humbled, and wanted to hear more. But he felt obliged to make an argument to test the truth. Drawn irresistibly into discussion, Abhay spoke up in answer to the words Srila Bhaktisiddhant had so tersely spoken in the first seconds of their meeting. "Who will hear your Chaitanya's message?" Abhay queried. "We are a dependent country. First, India must become independent. How can we spread Indian culture if we are under British rule?" Abhay had not asked haughtily, just to be provocative, yet his question was clearly a challenge. If he were to take this sadhu's remark to them as a serious one, and there was nothing in Srila Bhakti Siddhant's demeanor to indicate that he had not been serious, Abhay felt compelled to question how he could propose such a thing while India was still dependent. Srila Bhakti Siddhant replied in a quiet, deep voice that Krishna consciousness didn't have to wait for a change in Indian politics, nor was it dependent on who ruled. Krishna consciousness was so important, so exclusively important, that it could not wait. Abhay was struck by his boldness. How could he say such a thing? The whole world of India, beyond this little Ultdanga rooftop, was in turmoil and seemed to support what Abhay had said. Many famous leaders of Bengal, many saints, even Gandhi himself, men who were educated and spiritually minded, all might very well have asked this same question, challenging this sadhu's relevancy, and yet he was dismissing everything and everyone as if they were of no consequence. Srila Bhakti Siddhant continued. Whether one power or another ruled was a temporary situation, but the eternal reality is Krishna consciousness, and the real self is the spirit soul. No man made political system, therefore, could actually help humanity. This was the verdict of the Vedic scriptures and the line of spiritual masters. Although everyone is an eternal servant of God, when one takes himself to be the temporary body and regards the nation of his birth as worshipable, he comes under illusion. The leaders and followers of the world's political movements, including the movement for Swaraj, were simply cultivating this illusion. Real welfare work, whether individual, social, or political, should help prepare a person for his next life and help him re establish his eternal relationship with the Supreme. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had articulated these ideas many times before in his writings. There has not been, there will not be such benefactors of the highest merit as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees have been. The offer of other benefits is only a deception. It is rather a great harm, whereas the benefit done by him and his followers is the truest and greatest eternal benefit. This benefit is not for one particular country causing mischief to another, but it benefits the whole universe. The kindness that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has shown to jivas absolves them eternally from all wants, from all inconveniences, and from all the distresses. That kindness does not produce any evil, and the jivas who have it will not be the victims of the evils of the world. As Abhay listened attentively to the arguments of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he recalled a Bengali poet who had written that even less advanced civilizations like China and Japan were independent and yet India labored under political oppression. Abhay knew well the philosophy of nationalism, which stressed that Indian independence had to come first. An oppressed people was a reality. The British slaughter of innocent citizens was a reality, and independence would benefit people. Spiritual life was a luxury that could be afforded only after independence. In the present times, the cause of national liberation from the British was the only relevant spiritual movement. The people's cause was in itself God. Yet, because Abhay had been raised a Vaishnava, he appreciated what Srila Bhakti Siddhant was saying. Abhay had already concluded that this was certainly not just another questionable sadhu, and he perceived the truth in what Srila Bhakti Siddhant said. This sadhu wasn't concocting his own philosophy, and he wasn't simply proud or belligerent even though he spoke in a way that kicked out practically every other philosophy. He was speaking the eternal teachings of the Vedic literature and the sages, and Abhay loved to hear it. Srila Bhakti Siddhant, speaking sometimes in English and sometimes in Bengali, and sometimes quoting the Sanskrit verses of the Bhagavad Gita, spoke of Sri Krishna as the highest Vedic authority. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna had declared that a person should give up whatever duty he considers religious and surrenders unto him, the personality of Godhead. Sarv dharman pratyajyate mam ekam sharanam vraj. And the Shrimad Bhagavatam confirmed the same thing. Dharma projito kaitavo tra parmo nirmat sharanam satam. All other forms of religion are impure and should be thrown out, and only Bhagavad Dharam, performing one's duties to please the Supreme Lord, should remain. Srila Bhakti Siddhant's presentation was so cogent that anyone who accepted the Shastras would have to accept his conclusion. The people were now faithless, said Bhakti Siddhant, and therefore they no longer believed that devotional service could remove all anomalies, even on the political scene. He went on to criticize anyone who was ignorant of the soul and yet claimed to be a leader. He even cited names of contemporary leaders and pointed out their failures, and he emphasized the urgent need to render the highest good to humanity by educating people about the eternal soul and the soul's relation to Krishna and devotional service. Abhay had never forgotten the worship of Lord Krishna or his teachings in Bhagavad Gita, and his family had always worshipped Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose mission Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was espousing. As these Gaudiya Mutt people worship Krishna, he also had worshipped Krishna throughout his life and had never forgotten Krishna. But now he was astounded to hear the Vaishnava philosophy presented so masterfully. Despite his involvement in college, marriage, the national movement, and other affairs, he had never forgotten Krishna. But Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was now stirring up within him his original Krishna consciousness, and by the words of this spiritual master, not only was he remembering Krishna, but he felt his Krishna consciousness being enhanced 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. What had been unspoken in Abhay's boyhood, what had been vague in Jagannath Puri, what he had been distracted from at college, what he had been protected in by his father, now surged forth within Abhay in responsive feelings, and he wanted to keep it. He felt himself defeated, but he liked it. He suddenly realized that he had never before been defeated, but this defeat was not a loss, it was an immense gain. Srila Prabhupada, I was from a Vaishnav family, so I could appreciate what he was preaching. Of course, he was speaking to everyone, but he found something in me, and I was convinced about his argument and mode of presentation. I was so much struck with wonder, I could understand. Here is the proper person who can give a real religious idea. It was late. Abhay and Naren had been talking with him for more than 2 hours. One of the brahmacharis gave them each a bit of prasadam in their open palms, and they rose gratefully and took their leave. They walked down the stairs and onto the street. The night was dark. Here and there a light was burning, and there were some shops open. Abhay pondered in great satisfaction what he had just heard. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta's explanation of the independence movement as a temporary, incomplete cause had made a deep impression on him. He felt himself less a nationalist and more a follower of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. He also thought that it would have been better if he were not married. This great personality was asking him to preach. He could have immediately joined, but he was married, and to leave his family would be an injustice. Walking away from the ashram, Naren turned to his friend. So, Abhay, what was your impression? What do you think of him? He is wonderful, replied Abhay. The message of Lord Chaitanya is in the hands of a very expert person. Srila Prabhupada. I accepted him as my spiritual master immediately, not officially, but in my heart. I was thinking that I had met a very nice, saintly person. After his first meeting with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Abhay began to associate more with the Gaudiya Math devotees. They gave him books and told him the history of their spiritual master. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was one of 10 children born to Bhakti Vinod Thakur, a great Vaishnav teacher in the disciplic line from Lord Chaitanya himself. Before the time of Bhakti Vinod, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya had been obscured by teachers and sects falsely claiming to be followers of Lord Chaitanya but deviating in various drastic ways from his pure teachings. The good reputation of Vaishnavism had been compromised. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, however, through his prolific writings and through his social position as a high government officer, re-established the respectability of Vaishnavism. He preached that the teachings of Lord Chaitanya were the highest form of theism and were intended not for a particular sect or religion or nation, but for all the people of the world. He prophesied that Lord Chaitanya teachings would go worldwide and he yearned for it. The religion preached by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is universal and not exclusive. The principle of Kirtan as the future church of the world invites all classes of men, without distinction of caste or clan, to the highest cultivation of the spirit. This church, it appears, will extend all over the world and take the place of all sectarian churches which exclude outsiders from the precincts of the mosque, church, or temple. Lord Chaitanya did not invent himself to liberate only a few men of India. Rather, his main objective was to emancipate all living entities of all countries throughout the entire universe and preach the eternal religion. Lord Chaitanya says in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, in every town, country, and village, my name will be sung. There is no doubt that this unquestionable order will come to pass. Although there is still no pure society of Vaishnavas to be had, yet Lord Chaitanya's prophetic words will in a few days come true, I am sure. Why not? Nothing is absolutely pure in the beginning. From imperfection, purity will come about. Oh, for that day when the fortunate English, French, Russian, German, and American people will take up banners, mridangas, and kartals and raise kirtan through their streets and towns. What will that day come? When will that day come? As a prominent magistrate, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a responsible government officer. He served also as superintendent of the temple of Lord Jagannath and was the father of 10 children. Yet, in spite of these responsibilities, he served the cause of Krishna with prodigious energy. After coming home from his office in the evening, taking his meals and going to bed, he would sleep from 8 until midnight and then get up and write until morning. He wrote more than 100 books during his life, many of them in English. One of his important contributions with the cooperation of Jagannath Das Babaji and Gaur Kishore Das Babaji was to locate the exact birthplace of Lord Chaitanya in Mayapur, about 60 miles north of Calcutta. While working to reform Gaudiya Vaishnavism in India, he prayed to Lord Chaitanya, "Your teachings have been much depreciated. It is not in my power to restore them." And he prayed for a son to help him in his preaching. When on February 6, 1874, Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati was born to Bhakti Vinod Thakur in Jagannath Puri, the Vaishnavas considered him the answer to his father's prayers. He was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck and draped across his chest like the sacred thread worn by Brahmanas. His parents gave him the name Bimal Prasad. When Bimal Prasad was 6 months old, the carts of the Jagannath festival stopped at the gate of Bhakti Vinod's residence and for 3 days could not be moved. Bhakti Vinod Thakur's wife brought the infant onto the cart and approached the deity of Lord Jagannath. Spontaneously, the infant extended his arms and touched the feet of Lord Jagannath and was immediately blessed with the garland that fell from the body of the Lord. When Bhaktivinoda Thakur learned that the Lord garland had fallen unto his son, he realized that this was the son for whom he had prayed. One day, when Bimal Prasad was still a child of no more than 4 years, his father mildly rebuked him for eating a mango not yet duly offered to Lord Krishna. Bimal Prasad, although only a child, considered himself an offender to the Lord and vowed never to eat mangoes again. This was a vow that he would follow throughout his life. By the time Bimal Prasad was 7 years old, he had memorized the entire Bhagavad Gita and could even explain its verses. His father then began training him in proofreading and printing, in conjunction with the publishing of the Vaishnava magazine Sajjan Toshani. With his father, he visited many holy places and heard discourses from the learned Panditas. As a student, Bimal Prasad preferred to read the books written by his father instead of the school text. By the time he was 25, he had become well versed in Sanskrit, mathematics, and astronomy, and he had established himself as the author and publisher of many magazine articles and one book, Surya Siddhant, for which he received the epithet Siddhant Saraswati in recognition of his erudition. When he was 26, his father guided him to take initiation from a renounced Vaishnav saint, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, who advised him to preach the absolute truth and keep aside all other works. Receiving the blessings of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, Bimal Prasad, now Siddhant Saraswati, resolved to dedicate his body, mind, and words to the service of Lord Krishna. In 1905, Siddhant Saraswati took a vow to chant the Hare Krishna mantra a billion times. Residing in Mayapur in a grass hut near the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, he chanted the Hare Krishna mantra day and night. He cooked rice once a day in an earthen pot and ate nothing more. He slept on the ground, and when the rainwater leaked through the grass ceiling, he sat beneath an umbrella chanting. In 1911, while his aging father was lying ill, Siddhant Saraswati took up a challenge against pseudo Vaishnavas who claimed that birth in their caste was the prerequisite for preaching Krishna consciousness. The caste conscious Brahmana community had become incensed by Bhakti Vinod Thakur presentation of many scriptural proofs that anyone, regardless of birth, could become a Brahman Vaishnava. These Samartha Brahmanas, out to prove the inferiority of the Vaishnavas, arranged a discussion. On behalf of his indisposed father, young Siddhant Saraswati wrote an essay, The Conclusive Difference Between the Brahmanas and the Vaishnava, and submitted it before his father. Despite his poor health, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was elated to hear the arguments that would soundly defeat the challenge of the Smartas. Siddhant Saraswati then travelled to Midnapur, where Panditas from all over India had gathered for a 3 day discussion. Some of the Smarta Panditas who spoke first claimed that anyone born in a Shudra family, even though initiated by a spiritual master, could never become purified and perform the Brahminical duties of worshipping the deities of initiating disciples. Finally, Siddhant Saraswati delivered his speech. He began quoting Vedic references glorifying the Brahmanas, and at this the Smarta scholars became very much pleased. But when he began discussing the actual qualifications for becoming a Brahmana, the qualities of the Vaishnavas, the relationship between the two, and who, according to the Vedic literature, is qualified to become a spiritual master and initiate disciples, then the joy of the Vaishnav haters disappeared. Siddhant Saraswati conclusively proved from the scriptures that if one is born as a Shudra but exhibits the qualities of a Brahman, then he should be honored as Brahman despite his birth. And if one is born in a Brahman family but act like a Shudra, then he is not a Brahmana. After his speech, Siddhant Saraswati was congratulated by the president of the conference, and thousands thronged around him. It was a victory for Vaishnavism. With the passing away of his father in 1914 and his spiritual master in 1915, Siddhant Saraswati continued the mission of Lord Chaitanya. He assumed editorship of Sajjan Toshani and established the Bhagavad Press in Krishnanagar. Then in 1918, in Mayapur, he sat down before a picture of Gaurkishore Das Babaji and initiated himself into the sannyas order. At this time, he assumed the sannyas title Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati Goswami Maharaj. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was dedicated to using the printing press as the best medium for large scale distribution of Krishna consciousness. He thought of the printing press as a Brihad Mridanga, a big Mridanga. Although the Mridanga drum had traditionally been used to accompany Kirtan, even during the time of Lord Chaitanya, and although Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati himself led Kirtan parties and sent groups of devotees chanting in the streets and playing on the mridangas. Such kirtanas could be heard only for a block or two. But with the Brihad Mridanga, the big Mridanga drum of the printing press, the message of Lord Chaitanya could be spread all over the world. Most of the literature Abhay began reading had been printed on the Bhagavad press, which Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had established in 1915. The Bhagavad Press had printed the Chaitanya Charitamrit with commentary by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, the Bhagavad Gita with commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti, and one after another the works of Bhakti Vinod Thakur. This literature was the spiritual heritage coming from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who had appeared almost 500 years before. So we will stop here and we will read the next part in next hour.